Okay, Rachel Campos-Duffy is a New York Times best-selling author and television personality. She's the host of America's #1 rated cable news morning show, Fox and Friends Weekend, on the Fox News Network. She's also the host of the Spanish-language evening show, Fox Noticias. I don't speak Spanish, sorry. Rachel has also appeared as a frequent guest on NBC's Today Show and ABC's The View. In 2008, she co-hosted the series Speaking of Women's Health on the Lifetime Network with the legendary Florence Henderson. Rachel is a board member of Hope Through Education, a nonprofit that raises tuition money for economically disadvantaged children to attend Catholic schools. She also served on the board of Hispanics for School Choice. Rachel's youngest daughter, Valentina, was born with Down syndrome, and Rachel considers it a privilege to use her platform to advocate for her daughter and everyone with special needs. Rachel has a bachelor's degree in economics from Arizona State University. We won't hold that against her. Honors program and a master's degree in international affairs from the University of California, San Diego. She's married to Transportation Secretary and former Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy, and they have 9 awesome kids. So it's my honor to welcome Rachel Campos-Duffy. Thank you.
All right, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. It's been really inspiring just even speaking to so many of you before this event and seeing what you're all going through in this state. Your determination is really inspiring. I loved hearing that you got rid of DEI. I'll have you know that at the Department of Transportation, they just got rid of DEI. So there's something definitely happening. Something's in the water. How many of you have watched, you can just raise your hand. How many of you watched The Bachelor? Come on, don't be shy. Love is Blind. Farmer wants to be a wife, or farmer wants a wife. I ask you this because a lot of people watch these shows and they wonder, can you really find true love on a reality television show? And the answer is yes. I am living proof because I met my own husband on a reality TV show 25 years ago. Sean and I met on MTV's The Real World. I was on the 3rd season. Sean was on the 6th season. Mine was in San Francisco. His was in Boston. And then there was a reality TV show, spin-off show called Road Rules All-Stars, and we were both selected to be on that. So we met there, and then about a year and a half later, after we met on that show, we got married, and we started a family. And about 10 years after that, Sean decided he was going to run for Congress, and he won, and he represented Wisconsin's 7th District for 10 years. Now, Sean is the first reality TV star to successfully enter into national politics. Donald Trump is just the second. Now, Sean actually made a mistake of telling that story to Donald Trump once, and he did not like that story. He doesn't like to be second to anything. Here's some more reality TV trivia for you. Sean and I are the very first and longest married reality TV couple. We are also the most fertile, as you heard. We have 9 children, and they range from 5 to 25. So, now when you work on television and in politics, people have a lot of questions about your life, but I think the thing people are most curious about and ask Sean and I about are the 9 kids. And they want to know, what's it like raising 9 kids in such a, hyper-political family? And so I'm going to tell you a really quick story. It's a true story about my son. My son Jack is now 22. He just recently had our very first grandchild with his wife. But when he was around 12 or 13 and Sean was in Congress, we had just moved to a new town so Sean could be closer to the airport. And this house that we lived in had a basement. And in that basement, the kids kept all their toys, and so we called it the toy room. And one time I went down into the toy room, and it looked like a hurricane had gone through it, truly. And so I called all the kids down to the basement, and I said, everybody, you got to pick this up. And I left, and I came back, and it looked pretty much the way I left it, and I was pretty upset about it. And I called all the kids back down. I said, what the heck happened here? Why hasn't this been picked up? And Jack said, well, me and Evita's the oldest, we picked up our part. Everything you see out here, that's all the little kids. And I said what all the moms in this room would say, and I said, I don't care whose stuff this is. No one is leaving the basement until this gets picked up. And so Jack walked across the room to pick up a toy, and as he did that, he mumbled something. And I said, what did you say? And he said, nothing. And I said, well, I distinctly heard you say something. What did you say, Jack? And he said, nothing. And I looked at Jack, and I said, Jack, what did you say? And he said, fine. I called you a socialist. So that's what it's like. Gets thrown right back at you. Tonight I want to start by telling you a little bit about my parents. And it isn't just because I'm proud of them and I love them, which I do, but it's because it also explains why I'm here tonight and why I'm so passionate about education and why I want to support parents' rights in education and this very sensible idea of letting kids be kids. My father's parents came to Arizona from Mexico. My dad was born in a very small copper mining town in Arizona called Sonora. And he was the 11th of 15 children. Now, my dad's family, everybody in that town was poor, but my dad's family was poorer than most. And as I said, that actually says something in Sonora. All the Campos children slept in one room in a house with no running water. And all those kids had one green bike that they could share. My father occasionally recalls, and he recounts a very painful memory for him as a kindergartner when a fellow classmate cruelly pulled down his pants to reveal the depth of his family's poverty, which was that they couldn't afford underwear. You see, his family was so poor that they couldn't buy that for him, and it really shamed him in many ways. I could still see him. He kind of gets a little choked up when he tells the story. But it is out of that poverty and even the occasional humiliation that he developed a real work ethic and a sense of resourcefulness, and I think that has always been his greatest asset. So as a young boy, my father and his brothers were little entrepreneurs. They would go into the desert mountains and they would pick cactus leaves, which, if you know anything about traditional Mexicans and Mexican Americans, they eat it. So they'd go and pick the cactus leaves, they'd wash them, they'd peel them, they'd dice them, and then they would put them in buckets and sell them door to door. My father was also a shoeshine boy who made his best money on Friday nights, offering tough miners a spit shine before they went out on Friday night after a tough week of work. He also became an apprentice to a local piñata maker, and at the age of 12, he started his own piñata business. His mother, my abuelita Beatriz, she made the glue from scratch out of water and flour on the stove and helped him place his finished products in a small local market. At the age of 18, my father was the first in his family to graduate from high school. And after graduation, he joined the U.S. Air Force. He met my mother when he was stationed overseas in Spain. He married her, and they started a family. Even as a soldier in the Air Force, my dad was not above taking extra work after hours. And after a long day of working at the base, my father also worked at a Chinese restaurant at night. My mother, who still was not fluent in English, swept floors at a beauty salon. My parents did so much to get their little family ahead. And it is while working hard that they figured something out. They figured out that education might be a much faster way to get to the middle class that they really wanted their children to be a part of. And so when I was growing up, my father was often in night school. He was gone at night, and he was earning his degree. My mother ended up teaching herself English because she knew that in America, English was the language of opportunity. And in 1976, when I was just in kindergarten, my mother earned her GED, also having attended night school. Many years later, when she was in her 40s and I was a 19-year-old sophomore at Arizona State University, I found out that my mother had enrolled at my university as a freshman. She did not consult me. She just did it. I was mortified. You can imagine what that felt like to be in college and your mom was roaming campus. She would stop by the dorm because she's Latina, unannounced. She didn't care what anybody thought. We ended up taking a Spanish poetry class together. She graduated a year after I did. And I think, I just wish that back then I had had the maturity to understand what she was doing and just how courageous that was for her, being her second language, being in her 40s, everything else. My parents taught us by example about education, about opportunity, and about the American dream. And it is from their optimism and their dignity that I learned to never be a victim, which is why I never fell for any of the DEI stuff that got thrown at me. Today, that shoeshine boy is retired comfortably in sunny Arizona. His 4 children all have postgraduate degrees. And his 17 grandkids live lives that surpassed his wildest childhood imaginations. My family's story is an education story that could only be made in America. And it is the reason why my parents love America so much and why they taught us to just thank God every day that we were born here. Now, here's a couple things that I've learned in my 25 years of parenting that relate to schools. Number 1, pick the school first, then pick the house. So I did the opposite a couple times. Now my kids have to drive 45 minutes away to get to the right school. So I would do that differently. I think that the best part about having 9 kids is you get a lot of do-overs. Truly, it's very true. I could stand up here for hours and tell you stories of things that we've learned and done differently with the younger kids than we did with the older ones. One of those had to do with college. It took us 3 kids to figure out how to do the college thing. With the first 2, we let them pick the university. And one of our kids ended up going to the University of Chicago. The other one went to the University of Madison, Wisconsin. And then Sean and I felt really burned that we were giving money to people who hate us, who don't share our values. And then I did a podcast with Victor Davis Hanson. And I ended up asking him, I know, he's a national treasure, no question. And in that conversation, we were talking about this. And so I asked him, I said, hey, if your kids were going to school now, where would you send them? And he gave me a list of 5, and I wrote them down during the podcast. And so when the 3rd child was ready to go to college, I told her, you can go to any college you want, but mom and dad are only paying for these 5. And that's how it worked. And so she ended up choosing the University of Dallas, which is a classical Catholic university with a great books curriculum, and it was the best decision we ever made, and we are now continuing that with all the rest of the children. I am the product of both a public and Catholic school education. And I believe that every parent deserves the right to choose the best school for their child, one that provides a solid education and that matches the family's values. And that must include public education. We all pay for public education, and it is not too much for us to ask for administrators and school boards to spend more time or all their time thinking about what goes on in the classroom instead of what goes on in the bathrooms or in the locker rooms. Now, schools have changed a lot since I was a kid, and in my opinion, the only silver lining of the unconstitutional COVID lockdowns and shutdowns of our schools is that parents did get a look inside of the classroom through Zoom. It was like they were in the front row of the classroom, and what they saw horrified them. They saw anti-Americanism. They saw unscientific gender ideology that was being shoved down our children's throats. America's founding principles, our history, being distorted, even erased, to advance a new goal called equity. And children are still being taught to see everything through race and this cultural Marxism. And this idea that, everyone is either an oppressor or an oppressed person. It's child abuse. To ask a child to self-categorize as an oppressor or a victim, and yet this is still happening in way too many schools. Another thing that happened during COVID is that a brave mom started compiling TikTok videos of teachers who posted videos bragging about how they indoctrinate our kids in school. This woman ended up posting her content anonymously, and she called her expose Libs of TikTok. Here is an example, and this is not even the most egregious, but I just think it's just an example of one of the things that she, uncovered. Watch. Do we have it? It's not playing. There she is. Oh, yeah, she basically says that I'm sorry that it's not working. She basically talks about how every child comes in, she gives them a pronoun. If they get sassy and say, like, I'm a dinosaur or a T-Rex instead of the pronoun, she'll basically use that, call them T-Rex, and really almost humiliate them until the other kids start to tease them. It's just full manipulation of the children, and really bragging about it. And keep in mind, all that Libs of TikTok, the woman who put this together, all that she was doing was reposting what these teachers were already posting on TikTok. All she did was compile them into one place. And it turns out it went viral because compiling all of these videos into one location really proved to be invaluable to parents who were trying to figure out what was happening in their schools. And for providing this service, big tech censored her. The so-called Washington Post journalist doxed her, tried to scare her and intimidate her, which is why she was anonymous to begin with, and they tried to out her. In New Jersey, where I live, parents were fighting to open schools and get rid of cruel masking policies for kids. And while they were doing that, Governor Murphy and his education department snuck in a new sex education curriculum under the guise of LGBTQ sensitivity. This curriculum required teachers to teach gender fluidity beginning in kindergarten. The New Jersey Board of Education also suggested teachers use the Amaze website for supplemental material. I noticed, Suzanne, that you also highlighted that in your video. The content is so degenerate and sexually inappropriate for children that you'll just have to Google it. I didn't even want to put one of their videos up for you guys. Today, our children's test scores are worse than they have been since they ever started testing. And what are public schools doing? Inventing new ways to sexually confuse and rob our children of their innocence. Here's what a Rhode Island state senator, Representative Tiara Mack, tweeted after a similar bill to the New Jersey bill was introduced in Rhode Island. She wrote, quote, this was on Twitter, "I'm really excited for the House sex ed bill hearing today. Teaching comprehensive, queer, inclusive, pleasure-based sex ed was a highlight of my time teaching." She was a former teacher. Any adult who talks like this about children should never be around children. Full stop. Full stop. And yet, She was never shamed. She was never reprimanded. Everybody else who talks online about these, basically, which is state mandated grooming, none of them face any consequences to their careers or their reputation. And in fact, those of us who dare notice that this is highly creepy are the ones who are demonized and labeled intolerant. And it's all the more infuriating when you look at our nation's embarrassing test scores. Did you know that in China, they never shut down their schools during COVID? 195 million Chinese kids attended schools while our children were home. And for all the flaws of the communist system, and believe me, I understand there's a lot of flaws in that system, you cannot accuse them of not being singularly focused on education. They understand that children are the future and that the key to their nation and to taking on us, their geopolitical and economic challenger, is education. By the way, the Chinese have also state mandated that kids limit their social media. In fact, the TikTok that our children are getting addicted to, that they invented and got our kids addicted to, their children don't actually see the same TikTok. It's a censored version that's more education focused, just to show you how much our greatest competitor understands the importance of education. They're not fooling around with this silly stuff that we're doing, this dangerous and silly stuff that we're doing in our schools. Right now, US students rank 25th in math, behind Lithuania, Malta, Portugal. And what really makes my blood boil is how much we're spending for all this failure. Our worst performing public schools have the highest per pupil expenditures. So what is the answer? Well, my family chose to take our children out of government-run schools. However, several of our kids, one of them is still in public school, others have been in and out of public schools for various reasons, which is the point. Every child is different, and only the parent can understand what that child needs. We can all agree that we should never, ever cede our public schools to unions and to adults who want to separate our children from our family's values. We should never cede our schools to people who want to turn our children into little Marxist activists for them. Our children deserve a solid education and a real shot at the American dream that I believe my parents provided for us thanks to good schools. For that to happen, we need parents to run for school boards and for their friends and neighbors to support them. Now, the truth is, not everybody is cut out to be on a school board. Not everyone has the personality to run. Not everyone has the resilience and the sort of, courage to take what it takes once you get on the board. But everyone can support and donate money to help make sure that the right people win, which is why you are here today. Look, things are actually looking up for us. Not long ago, parents were shamed and labeled domestic terrorists by the Federal Department of Justice for standing up for their children and against gender ideology in school. 2 nights ago, at that joint session in Congress, our president invited as his special guest to sit next to the First Lady, a mom who stood up to a school for secretly transitioning her child. Not only did the president invite her, but he called it what it was to the entire nation. He said, "This is child abuse." He said, "This is child abuse." And then he said what I thought was maybe the most important line in his entire speech. He said, "You are made perfectly the way God made you." And perhaps the most iconic and heart-melting moment of the last month of Donald Trump's time in office was when he signed the executive order banning men in female sports, surrounded by all those beautiful, grateful female little girl athletes. I believe the tide has indeed turned, and we have the cultural upper hand on this issue. But what we need to do is to capitalize on this moment with big wins on school boards. You are gathered today for a great cause, to raise money for a great cause, and to give hope to Oregon families who want their kids to have a chance at the same opportunity for a serious education that all of us had. We're here because we believe in a parent's right in education, and we believe in letting kids be kids. If we allow our education system to remain in the control of these radicals who do not share our values, we will lose this generation of kids, and we will lose our place as that shining city on a hill. This is the civil rights battle of our time, and you are all the foot soldiers in this great battle. I want to end with this. Until my husband Sean was elected back in 2010, neither he or I had ever entered into the U.S. Capitol. So one of the great joys for me as a mom was watching my own kids walk the halls of Congress at such very young and formative years. When our little ones would see the television and there would be an image of the U.S. Capitol, they would say, "Look, it's Daddy's office." And, it would give me goosebumps every time. I have a daughter, her name is Paloma, she's 16 years old. When her daddy was elected, she was around 4 years old. And that was the first time when she was 4 that she had ever been to the U.S. Capitol as well. And when she went, she developed a fascination with the Capitol building and its magnificent dome. Again, it started when she was 4 years old. She went to the city. Wherever she would walk, she'd want to turn around and see where was that beautiful dome. And she became particularly fascinated with Lady Freedom, which is the impressive statue that stands on the top of the dome. It's interesting, I'd been to the Capitol before she got to the Capitol a couple months before, and I hadn't even noticed there was a statue up there. She immediately figured out what it was. And as I said, it's this impressive dome. It's about the size of a giraffe that stands right on top of the dome. And she wanted to know everything about it. She wanted to know, who was she? Why was she there? Why was she dressed that way? And so I tried to learn everything I could so I could feed her curiosity. It turns out that Republican President Abraham Lincoln erected Lady Freedom during the Civil War. She is a beautiful and fierce warrior. And if you look at her, she wears a toga-style dress, and it has a Native American cape over it. She wears this glorious helmet adorned with stars and an eagle's head with feathers resembling a Native American headdress. In one hand, she carries a sheathed sword. In the other, she carries a laurel wreath, which is a symbol of victory. And if you look at Lady Freedom, you will notice that she's facing east, because she's always keeping her eye on England. She's very protective of our nation's freedom. When I was in Washington, D.C. during Paloma's first visit, I went down to the House of Representatives gift shop, and I found a little keychain of Lady Freedom, and I gave it to Paloma. And when we returned home from that trip, she immediately went into the house and she hung it from the highest turret of her pink plastic Cinderella castle. That Halloween, I had the very unenviable task of trying to put together a Lady Freedom costume. They don't sell that at Walmart, it turns out. I know, right? Paloma wanted to be Lady Freedom, and in fact, she had these adorable questions because she really thought she was going to be that. And she asked me, "Mommy, what happens if I get tired when I'm standing up there?" She wanted to know if she could come down. She wanted to know if her siblings could come up and visit her. She had so many great questions about it. But my Paloma is not the only person who wants to grow up and be Lady Freedom. Every woman in this room is a Lady Freedom, and every one of you in this room is a freedom fighter, willing to sacrifice for your children, for your neighbor's children, and for children you don't even know. Why? Because you believe every child is worthy of a solid education, and an education that will give them that shot at the American dream. So today, I salute all of you for being generous, for being patriotic, for being happy warriors in this battle to save our public schools and to protect our children's innocence. I want to thank you for inviting me. I want to tell you, I really hope God blesses this organization, because I think it is the grassroots kind of organization that will literally save our country. So may God bless all of you, and may God, of course, always bless America. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.